A giant human pyramid to support Australia's Olympic campaign could not camouflage the intense pressure of today's finals, and American Sammy Duval was the first victim when he dropped a handle in the men's tricks. Mick Neville seized the opportunity, and with superb control, the Queenslander amassed 9,070 points to clinch the title. Defending overall women's champion Karen Neville was an early casualty in the women's slalom. American Dina Mapple won the event on a countback after a three-way tie. But it was American Andy Mapple who really stole the limelight. The four-times world champion skied brilliantly to set a new Moomba Masters record. Keeping it in the family, Dina Mapple completed a personal double when she won the women's jump event with a leap of 40.6 metres. In the men's jump, Victoria's John Livingston ended up in the safety net and was one of three contestants to suffer near misses after losing control. Queensland's Jeff Carrington won the title, and his jump of 59.6 metres also earned him a motor car.
We've had three significant earthquakes in the 170-odd history of Newcastle, the most recent being 1925. A lot of people can remember that, but nothing, of course, of the magnitude of this one.
From 5:30 this morning, thousands came to City Hall to watch radio. It's a way the medium once operated, with an audience in the studio as live broadcasts go to air. Satellite technology beamed today's Newcastle production to 142 stations across Australia. It's a first for the ABC to hook into the national network in this way. Spanning 22 hours, the broadcast was organised to help Newcastle's earthquake victims. Telecom volunteers manned 40 toll-free lines as callers made pledges. On stage, Ian McNamara of Australia All Over fame sang and talked through a 4.5-hour live and mostly unscripted broadcast.
A remnant of the earthquake, and it's for auction, Marie reckons, but it'll have to bring big dollar to get that auctioned off. I was going to do Why I Live Where I Live, because I missed it this morning, but this was sent to me by Des Kinsella. He's a pilot on the harbour, and Des... One, two, three. Give us a go! That's from Newcastle. Thank you very much for listening this morning.
You know, it's fairly hectic here today. We just run around and we just have our heads on the chopping block all the time. It's hard. It's not organised in terms of having a lot of things. It's all running around, as you saw.
The Radiothon continues tonight, with City Hall open to the public until 10 p.m. The Morn Camp continued campaigning today, hindered by the theft last night of a vital car. Loaded with publicity material and fitted with a public address system, the rather conspicuous blue HK Holden was stolen from Cook's Hill sometime after 11 p.m. The robbery comes after a week of anonymous telephone calls to Lee Morn's campaign office and a threatening note left on the car's windscreen.
Really, I'd hate to think that it's part of electioneering that the thing's been stolen, but it is a bit of a drawback to us, but we're tough, resolute Newcastle people. We can handle such things.
The independent candidate says he hopes the theft is no more than a jaunt by joyriders, but the timing of the event, less than a week before polling day, raises some doubts in his mind.
We're in front, and if this is an indication that the other people are even more worried than I thought they were, so be it.
The study's brief was to draw up guidelines for the reconstruction of Beaumont Street in a way sympathetic to the area's unique heritage and ethnic culture. Today, the outcome of that brief was presented to Hamilton residents. Consultants have come up with a plan they hope will make the street more attractive to both pedestrians and vehicles. It's envisaged that pavements will be extended at intersections, allowing for sidewalk development akin to the Picardy Centre. The plan also allows for two side streets to be developed as pedestrian malls. Of course, such a plan requires funding if it's ever to be implemented. Today, fears emerged that many business owners don't have the dollars to match the dreams.
One of the concerns we must have is the plight of business owners, particularly those who are underinsured, in trying to meet, not demands is probably the wrong word, but meet the requirements of a plan like this, because it's going to cost.
Others said the consultants have gone ahead without adequate consultation, fearing the implementation of this plan could spell financial ruin.
I'm sorry, you've put a dampener on mine if I wanted to sell out, that it's just pushed me right out of the business. Because you pushed me right down behind the thing. When people do their ordnance checks and everything, so I say, oh yes, there could be a vehicle passageway coming through here. Oh, I don't think you should buy it.
Scepticism too from Lord Mayor John McNaughton, who says that unless government funding is forthcoming, business people will not have the money to build anything but basic structures in Beaumont Street.
I feel, to tell you quite honestly, elated about the opportunities, but very disillusioned about the likelihood of getting it all together. I don't see that the Act can be put together unless we get properly structured meetings.
The bandit, brandishing a sawn-off firearm, menaced two female tellers, one a trainee, at the Building Society's King Street branch shortly before 2:30 this afternoon. An elderly female customer was in the bank at the time. Eyewitnesses say the man was very jumpy as he threatened staff with the weapon. He escaped with a small amount of money, running east along King Street. Police combed the area without success. Detectives say the gunman is in his early 20s, 175 centimetres tall, of medium build with black collar-length hair. He was wearing a blue and gold beanie, black t-shirt, blue jeans and carrying a white plastic shopping bag. Police ask anyone who saw a man fitting this description to contact the Newcastle Armed Hold-Up Squad on 290654.
The main building of the Hamilton Public School was built in 1872, the others in 1912. But unlike many buildings in the area, the school sustained only minor damage. When school resumed this year, the 200 students and their teachers decided to do their bit to help the schools and fellow students that weren't as lucky. Within 4 weeks, a mini fete was organised, with the whole community contributing to make it a success. The fete lasted only 2 hours, but raised just over $3,000. The cheque was presented to the Lord Mayor during this morning's assembly. This afternoon, the Institute of Engineers Australia donated the profits of their recent Newcastle earthquake conference, totalling $14,000. The chemical collection campaign began last month, and the Water Board has already received almost 400 calls from householders wanting to clear their homes of unwanted chemicals. Managing Director of the Hunter Water Board, Paul Broad, says surprising numbers of houses have deadly or environmentally dangerous chemicals gathering dust.
It's an environmental issue that concerns the whole of the Board's area of operations. We're trying to stop these chemicals, the pesticides, the oils, solvents, entering the Board's sewer and the stormwater channels.
Safety is also a concern, with many household chemicals either highly poisonous or flammable.
A lot of people don't realise what they have in the garage, but what we're looking for, hopefully trying to get the organochlorine pesticides, the pesticides that take decades to break down, like the chlordane, dieldrin, aldrin, the heptachlors, mostly chemicals like that.
The collection staff use specially fitted vehicles to transport the chemicals, which will either be recycled or incinerated, to ensure they do not find their way into ocean and river environments. The collection truck will be in Lake Macquarie and Newcastle over the next few weeks.
For the last 4 years, Beach Inspector Warren Smith has not seen a sea snake on Nobby's Beach. This week, 2 snakes have been washed ashore in big seas and northerly winds. It's believed this yellow belly sea snake, either exhausted or too sick to fight the tide, was washed with kelp onto the beach early this morning. According to Newcastle University biologist Dr. Brian Conroy, sea snakes are quite common offshore in the summer months, chasing small schools of fish or prawns. Dr. Conroy says in the water, the snakes are harmless.
In swimming, they're not dangerous at all. It's when they're in a confined space and people are handling them that they are dangerous. Their venom is extremely potent.
The yellow belly's venom is up to 10 times more toxic than the cobra's, and while no fatalities have been recorded in Australia, deaths have been registered overseas.
The effects of the venom start to take effect after about 10 minutes, and probably you're very sick, certainly within half an hour.
Tonight, the snake has been taken for study to the Shortland Wetlands Centre. Meanwhile, lifeguards are calling for beachgoers to be wary.
So just a warning to people, if you see something you're unsure of, and especially around that tail area where the markings are there, be careful. Better to mark the area. Don't go near it. Come up and get some supervision from up around the beaches or wherever, and someone will go down and look after it.
Despite his prominence as one of the Hawke government's leading ministers, Mr Caron's appearance in Maitland was low-key. The Primary Industries and Energy Minister met with 1 Nelson Bay fisherman, 3 Port Stephens oyster farmers, and later 5 Morpeth farmers worried about levee banks on the Hunter.
And we are looking towards the federal government and you as a person who has been associated with land problems all of your life to take this matter up for us.
Since the announcement of the election, Mr Caron has been travelling the campaign circuit. Also on that circuit has been the nagging question of high interest rates. While the local member Eric Fitzgibbon was not prepared to argue with a lone protester, the minister was.
If you want to bring down interest rates with monetary policy, you have to expand the money supply. If you want to bring down inflation with monetary policy, you have to contract the money supply.
Well, you talk.
And that's all sloganeering nonsense. That's the problem.
You talk of nonsense. I've listened to Mr Keating on the news regularly, telling me that things are getting better, and things are getting worse.
Despite some politicians' keenness to foreshadow falls in interest rates, Mr Caron said it was impossible to make predictions.
The market will decide that, and it's often about market perceptions, and part of the reason why politicians get into trouble talking about interest rates is that market perceptions are often quite different to what our perceptions are, with the best advice from Treasury and the Department of Finance on what our fundamentals are.
While in the Hunter, the minister also criticised a Liberal platform to abandon government export control over coal. Mr Caron said removing regulations would mean smaller mines would be priced out of the market. The New South Wales Coal Association has called this scaremongering, saying a freer market would mean new potential for mines of all sizes. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
For 22-year-old Scott Carter, a workout with remedial masseur Victor Sokolsky is a weekly ritual as he prepares to take his place on the field with the Newcastle Knights. Holding down the number 9 hooker's position is the fulfilment of a dream for the youngster, who at 19 years of age coached Denman in the Group 21 competition. His form towards the end of last year was excellent. Carter's happy with the start to 1990, but has no grandeurs about holding his spot.
This year's starting to look good. I've started in first grade, and if I just keep following Sergeant Chief, well, I'm sure I'll score a few more. And I just got to keep the form on the board to keep my spot.
Last week, Carter showed a Terry Lamb willingness to back up, and it paid off with a handsome try. During the week, there has been some criticism from coach Alan McMahon about what he called negative reports of the Knights' away record, something that Carter and the rest of the team are out to rectify with a win over Manly.
We've got to knuckle down, do our job, and then things will come our way in the media sort of thing. So, you know, we're not really worried about that part of it. We just got to do our job, and he'll do his.
Ashland Chemicals hit the news last year as it bid to develop a new factory on land at Berkeley Vale on the Central Coast. After first agreeing with the application, Wyong Shire Council had an about-face, bowing under resident pressure to have the development blocked. At that time, the locals voiced concerns over runoff water, pointing to the possibility of a spill contaminating the local waterways. The American-owned Ashland took the fight to the Land and Environment Court and lost that battle on the grounds that the land on which it hoped to build was not properly zoned. In its search for a new home, Ashland Chemicals has now turned its eye here to land in the Rutherford Industrial Estate west of Maitland. It wants to get out of Sydney. Its old plant is considered no longer productive and in some ways no longer meets strict environmental guidelines. The new plant at Rutherford would cost $25 million to build and employ 100 people at peak production. It would make resin, which is used in the manufacture of paint. The company has already given Maitland Council assurances that its development would fit the zoning of the industrial estate and meet all environmental requirements.
We did not expect any opposition on the Central Coast. What we are saying this time is that we are very upfront. If people do want to have a talk to us about what we intend to do, we're willing to have a talk to these people because we believe that we've got nothing to hide and what we're doing is environmentally sound.
The environmental issues in Maitland come first.
Before jobs and investment?
Yes, before jobs and investment.
Although you would welcome $25 million worth.
Well, as long as it's a healthy $25 million, it is better than a $25 million investment which would have a hazardous effect on the residents of Maitland.
Well, disappointing from the point of view that we had hoped we would get it right first time up, and he showed a lot of signs of being a very talented player. But he was convinced in his own mind that his knee was bad and that it wasn't going to stand up to the rigours of an NBL season. And I think once that's embedded in a player's mind, it's very difficult to change.
Ken, also your second recruit, Greg Lazard, has had a bit of a checkered time trying to settle in with the Falcons.
He has. He's done very well for us on the court, and he's got 22 or 23 rebounds a game, and if anybody can maintain that, of course, they'd lead the league. But he has had some assimilation problems off the court, and these kids come from a totally different background, and all their friends are black, and the environment that they grow up in is black, and then they come here and it's all white. The difference with Greg and some of the other kids that come down here is that he's fairly much of a loner. So most of the players that come tend to just go out in groups. Greg tends to go out by himself when he goes out, and it's more difficult. But I think he's starting to settle down now.
Curry's going to be replaced by James Bullock, a very, very good player who's had NBL experience.
Well, James Bullock, we may get really lucky because Bullock was the player that I went after heavily last year, and I couldn't track him down. And when I finally did find James, I'd already contracted another two players, so I offered him a position with the Hunters on the basis that, I signed him to both groups on the basis that he would be available should I decide to make a change. And he did say to me right at the start, and the people representing him, that James will destroy Curry. And I said, well, he'll have the opportunity to prove it, and if he proves it to me, then I'll make the adjustment, obviously, for the team. So he's got the chance easier.
Okay, the third year that you've been at the helm, first year you took them to the finals, last year was a bit of a disappointing year. What's in shape for 1990?
Well, when we decided to go with this policy of young talent and try and improve them sufficiently enough to turn ourselves into a powerhouse for a lot of years, Basil Sellers said to me, do you feel that we can get to the finals in 3 years' time with this policy of youth?
And I said, well, I'd be very hopeful we can get there in 2. He said, well, 3, and I'll be very happy, because if you can get there in 3 with this team, you'll be there for 10. And this is the 2nd year, and I'm hopeful that we can take that step. But from our owner's point of view, if we can make good solid progress this year and be there next year, we'll have laid the foundations to be... We're still so young, and we can be powerful for another decade.
So the youngsters coming through, James Carr, Neil Turner, Peter Hill, these players you're going to rely heavily on this year?
Oh yes, I mean Peter Hill, Peter Harvey will certainly be required to do a major job, and they've done very well in the pre-season for us. Neil Turner is starting to make tremendous progress, I think, forward. James Carr's made a lot of progress, but he's still got a lot of rough edges. He's got as much talent as any straight 6'8" kid in the country. Funnily enough, he's a Newcastle sort of 6'8" that can run, jump and shoot. I need him to bang a few more heads, but no, the youngsters are coming on very... I think we've got 5 outstanding young players, and even Mike Johnson's still got, you know, the best 5 or 6 years at least of his basketball in front of him. So it's the critical era is our Americans. They must be able to negate the other Americans. If they can do that, then we'll surprise a lot of people.
Every team has a goal for a season. What's the Falcons' goal for 1990?
I really want our goal to be to make the finals, because I think with the talent that we've got, and watching how we played in the United States, particularly against Alabama, that is still figuring in the finals in the United States, we know that we can play with anybody in the country. So, but you've got to get there first, and it's the consistency that you need to make finals.
Though Ita Buttrose is best known for her publishing posts controlling a large section of Australia's women's magazines, today she spoke woman to woman about her fears for the future of the country.
Well, what concerns me is that Australia is not going to offer children as bright a future as it offered me when I was a young person. And I think that we have to decide as adults, you know, what sort of Australia we want to leave to our children. I mean, there are so many children in crisis in Australia and in Newcastle. I mean, Newcastle is involved in this just as much as every other part of Australia. We have children who drink too much, we have young girls having babies, we have young girls having abortions, we have children taking drugs, children infected with HIV, children living below the poverty level, and all these things affect the future of our country.
Despite diverse experience in the print media plus television and radio, she still has time to chair the National Advisory Committee on AIDS and act as a patron for many children's organisations. The Hunter 2000 Club is itself a charity raising funds for the Salvation Army and the Newcastle Youth Service. But members were also keen to learn how they can adopt Ita's secret of success.
Well, I said that I thought it was important to set goals. You must have a plan. I think if you want to be successful in business, you must define what it is you want to achieve and then work your way towards that.
And that is exactly what Ita has done, first rising to national prominence in the 70s when she took on a number of high-profile editorships with Kerry Packer's Australian Consolidated Press. She controlled the Australian Women's Weekly, Clio, Belle, Brides and Mode. She then became editor-in-chief of the Daily and Sunday Telegraph, then came Women's Day and Portfolio, but now Ita has a magazine that is uniquely hers.
My 5-year plan at the moment is to make my company successful and get the magazine well and truly established, and then see how the company can develop from there.
Hunter Sport Support is a voluntary group of professional people committed to promoting the region through sport. The award scheme has been established to help young sports people fund their careers. It's recognition of the sacrifices many families make to help their talented children excel in sport.
There are a lot of families just can't simply afford to pay the training fees, pay the cost of travel and so on. So we saw a need to do that, and we got a group of local businesses together who are prepared to put in money to finance these scholarships.
Today, 15 young sportsmen and women aged between 12 and 19 were recognised for their sporting achievements. They were chosen from 150 applications. The standard was so high, some Australian champions had to be left out of today's honours list. The Hunter Sport Support Group has the backing of the Hunter Academy of Sport, but the money for the awards has come from a handful of generous local companies. The money will be held in trust and allocated on a needs basis to the chosen athletes over the next 12 months. John Church, NBN News.